morning, Fountain Street community. Good morning, friends from all over the country, and one of you or two from outside the country. I know that some of you are watching from Seattle, from New York, from Florida, from New Hampshire, from Colorado. One of you even lives in Vietnam right now. So welcome, welcome, welcome here. We are so glad that you're here with us. We welcome all of you, whoever you are, whatever your theology, whoever you love, however you identify, whatever culture you come from, you, my dearest beloved, you belong here. You are welcome here with us. Today is the second Sunday in Advent, and we are exploring the theme of hope. And we begin today with this reading from the Reverend Victoria Safford, who is a Unitarian Universalist minister. She tells the story of a friend of hers who lost a student of hopelessness. And at some point, her friend told her, "You know, I cannot save them. I am not here to save anybody or to save the world. All I can do, all I am called to do, is to plant myself at the gates of hope. Sometimes they come in, sometimes they walk by, but I stand here every day and I call out until my lungs are sore with calling, and beckon and urge them in towards beautiful life and love, toward beautiful life and love." Today at Fountain Street Church, we are planting ourselves at the gates of hope. In the current state of our world, with all the hopelessness that is around us, I hear this as an invitation, as a call to each of us to plant ourselves at the gates of hope and to urge one another to come in. So please come in. Please sit down. Make yourself comfortable virtually. We are in this together. There is hope here today. We are planting ourselves at the gates of hope. I am so glad that you have joined us today. I am so grateful that you're here. It is good to be here in community today. As a reminder, on the bottom lower right corner, you have the options of choosing the quality of this video. You have the option of choosing closed captioning or subtitles. And lastly, I ask that if you choose to use the chat feature, to please be mindful, to please be respectful of the rest of us. We thank you for being here with us. It is truly beautiful to be in community, even if it's virtually. And we cannot wait until this beautiful sanctuary is filled with all you beautiful people. We are getting there very soon, but for now, I welcome you virtually. Welcome to our service. Let us worship together.
Last week, we started lighting the Advent wreath candles. As Greta Jo described, there are many traditions, many ways in which churches or communities or families and households choose to honor the old tradition of lighting an Advent candle week after week. There's no right way or wrong way, and there are different ways to do it, but what's important is that we hold on to the light that we cultivate week after week. One of my favorite ways to light the candle is to already have the other ones lit and ready to go. To me, there's this sense of community when you pass on the flame, when you pass on the embers, the light, and the energy to the next. And so we have the candle of faith that was lit last week, and we learned the ways in which faith can be terrifying and liberating. And so this week, we do the same by lighting the candle of hope. And as we do so, we take the light from the faith candle and we pass it on. Hope can feel like something that's hard to come by, especially in 2020. But I am reminded over and over and over again that hope is indeed something we can cultivate within and something that we can pass on to others. And that in itself is a liberating gift. And so as we light these candles, I invite you to hear the prayer that we used for the community candles. We pray that in lighting these candles, Hope is experienced and known by all of those in our community and beyond these sacred walls. But what's more, we pray that we find that space in ourselves in which we can cultivate hope and share it with others. Blessed be the mystery and blessed be the power of liberating hope.
Hello again. Over the last 6 months, as I began my work here as the senior minister of Fountain Street Church, I have been trying to understand who we are as a whole, and I have learned that each Fountain Streeter is unique. We are unique in the ways we think, in the ways we see the world, in the ways we feel. But we do have some things in common. For example, our desire to see different perspectives, our longing for a better world, and our skepticism. I think every Fountain Streeter has questioned what has been presented to us as the truth. And I have heard so many of your stories of how you came to Fountain Street, and your stories growing up go something like this. Growing up, you were told that if you do this one thing, God will punish you. Something along the lines of that. And yet you saw people over and over and over doing that one thing. And those were the people who seemed to be living the best lives. It seems that life was smiling at them. And at some point you were like, this doesn't make sense. Wait a minute, I don't buy it. You say, from my experience, from my perspective, that doesn't add up. And that's because I like to think of the truth as something larger than one thing. I like to think of the truth as one of those geodesic domes that are appearing all over town. You know what I'm talking about? Let's say you and I go in there and we can pretend that the world outside is the whole truth. And then you look through one of those little windows, what looks like a window, and you tell me what you see from that perspective. And then I'll say, from my perspective, which means from my lived experiences of almost 50 years, from my Cuban-born perspective, from my training as a minister, this is what I see. This is my perspective. This is my truth. There are many, many, many perspectives which are part of the larger truth, but you already know that, of course. During my very first sermon here in May, inspired by my theology professor in seminary who once said that the truth is like a puzzle, I brought you a piece of a puzzle, and I said that in order for us to see the larger truth, we needed all the pieces in the puzzle. Then, during my last sermon here a couple of weeks ago, I said that I was born hungry. I was even hungry for different perspectives and ideas about God. I have always been hungry for different philosophies on how to live a better life, on how to create a better society, and how to care for one another and the earth. I am a seeker. I am hungry for truth and meaning, and that led me to look under every rock. It led me to explore different religions and spiritualities. But when I encountered Unitarian Universalism 15 years ago, I joined almost instantly because someone said that Unitarian Universalism was like a buffet of different religions and traditions. And today, 15 years later, that's a horrible metaphor to use because it brings up many questions, including the question of cultural appropriation. But 15 years ago, when I was so hungry, a buffet sounded just right. While I could never commit to any other religion, Unitarian Universalism was perfect for me because I was curious and I wanted to know this perspective and that perspective and that perspective. And although Fountain Streeters are not necessarily Unitarian Universalists, we do have that in common, our desire for different perspectives. That's one of the things that makes us religious liberals. Yet, a year ago, Gary Dorrient, one of the authorities in the field of liberal theology, spoke here at Fountain Street Church, and he had something to say about that, about the different perspectives. His talk was titled, "The Future of Liberal Religion," and I was so happy that he was here, that he spoke right here at Fountain Street, because I loved his books in seminary.
In our time, theology exploded into a vast array of new theologies, curtailing the tendency to identify oneself with only one kind. Fluid boundaries and hybrid identities became the norm. It started with liberation theology in the US and Latin America, which led to feminist, womanist, post-colonial, postmodern, gay rights, Latinx, Minjung, and transgender theologies. 80% of the theologies in that list came out of the seminary where I teach, Union Seminary. Liberation theology was and is an eruption of repressed voices. Liberal theology addressed the cultured despisers of religion, responding to modern criticism and science. It had a social conscience, but it spoke from a standpoint of cultural privilege. Liberals did not attack white supremacy as a structure of power based on privilege that presumes to define what is normal. Liberalism was about eliminating barriers to individual opportunity. Liberation theology, all of them, privileged a different set of questions. how to be liberated from structures of violence and oppression that repress the personhood of millions.
Truth is, we have been missing many pieces of the puzzle, partly because those perspectives have been undervalued. This poem from the writer Eduardo Galeano from Uruguay expresses this beautifully and also painfully. He says, "Fleas dream of buying themselves a dog, and the nobodies dream of escaping poverty. That one magical day, good luck will suddenly rain down on them, will rain down in buckets, but good luck doesn't even fall in a fine drizzle, no matter how hard the nobodies summon it. The nobodies, nobody's children, owners of nothing, the nobodies who are not but could be, who don't speak languages but dialects, who don't have religions but superstitions, who don't create art but handicrafts, who don't have cultures but folklore, who are not human beings but human resources, who do not have faces but arms, who do not have names but numbers, who do not appear in the history of the world, but in the crime section of the newspaper. The nobodies who are not worth the bullet that kills them." Do you see the minimization there? Minimization. The subtle ways in which a dominant culture makes the perspective of other people inferior to their own. The nobodies who don't speak languages but dialects, who don't have religions but superstitions, who don't create art but handicraft, who don't have culture but folklore. That minimization, that belittling implies superiority or supremacy. Supremacy, this myth that one perspective or one philosophy is above all others. That there is one race that is superior to all others, that there is one gender that is superior, that there is one body type that is superior or even the norm. None of that is true, of course, it is just a myth. There is no such thing as superior, there are just different perspectives, different ways of being, different ways of expressing ourselves in the world. While supremacy of any type is just a myth, it is also a mentality that oppresses the personhood of millions, that causes tremendous harm, and that keep us from learning from one another. So, okay, what does any of this have to do with hope? I said we would be talking about hope, which is our theme for this Advent Sunday. And I'm speaking about this because my hope for this world, my hope for the future of humanity, my hope for us here at Fountain Street is that we step back and do this bird's eye view in order to see the whole truth, the whole picture. And that requires bringing different voices and perspectives in order to complete the puzzle. My hope lies in us looking at every philosophy and every perspective on how to live, how to get along, how to build better societies, how to relate to one another, and how to care for the earth. That's why diversity is so important in group. If you have a problem to solve, you have more chances of solving it when you have diverse perspectives, because we can see the problem from different angles. We can try different approaches. Diversity is not just a buzzword, it enriches our lives. We can also learn from various cultures around the world who have found a solution to the problems we are facing. Never before have we had so much access to the information we have now from different cultures and philosophies that can help us navigate life. From some cultures, we learn how the human spirit can survive struggles, sometimes with grace or wit or grit or by savoring life. From other cultures, we learn how to build governments that truly, truly serve the interests of the people. From others, we learn how to live in relationship with the earth, in a cycle of reciprocity, which means that you give to the earth and the earth gives back to us instead of just taking, taking, taking. From others, we learn how to prevent wildfires because this was their land for generations, and their ancestors left them with wisdom on how to prevent them and how to deal with them. However, for centuries, we have considered their wisdom to be inferior. So all of this gives me hope now, but my journey with hope has been a long one. When I was younger, my hope was immature. My hope was that someone was going to come to save us. Someone was going to come save us. The scientists were going to figure it out. The people running for office with their big promises were going to save us all. My hope was that things perhaps would turn out for the better on their own. Have faith that things will turn out better. That was my hope. But seminary forced me to find a hope that was real, not fake. A hope that was strong, not flimsy. A hope that was large enough to include the hope of others. The hopes of the people I saw in hospitals, in prisons, in detention centers, on the streets, and at the southern border. Because I had to give them hope. I had to find hope because I had to give them hope when they were hopeless. Look, whatever little hope you have, you hang on to it, okay? Please hang on to every last little hope you have. But let us work on making our hope bigger and larger. Let us get away from passive hope, this idea that things are going to get better on their own or that someone else is coming to save us. Let us instead adopt this posture of active hope, a posture of active hope. There's a great book with that title, if you would like to look it up, Active Hope. In my journey from hopelessness to hope, I found many philosophies born from struggle that resonated with me. But one that continues to give me hope is the work of the science fiction writer and theologian, Octavia Butler. In a moment, I will share a few fragments from her book, Parable of the Sower, which, by the way, just made it to the New York Times bestsellers list after almost 30 years since it was published, because Octavia Butler and her wisdom and her philosophy is speaking to many people today, although she passed away in 2006. Here is Octavia Butler's perspective on God. God is power. Infinite, irresistible, inexorable, indifferent. And yet God is pliable, trickster, teacher, chaos, clay. God exists to be shaped. God is change. Understand this. Use it. Shape God. To that I say amen and ashe. That gives me so much hope. Because if God is clay, something we can shape, then we have the power to shape a new world. We are not doomed. We have the power to change ourselves and our societies. And yes, that gives me hope. In fact, her theology informs mine. I see God as creativity, as the creativity of the cosmos that created the universe and that continues to create through each one of us. From my perspective, we have the power to create. And at any given moment, we choose to create either chaos or we can create beauty. Beauty, by which I mean harmony and peace. From my naturalist perspective, if you are a living organism, and you are, my dearest beloved, you are a living organism, You have one mandate from evolution, and that is to grow and to evolve. And as human beings, we can also create the right conditions for all living things to grow and to evolve, because that's the natural way. My hope is for a future where that is possible. My hope is that we actively work towards building that future. The writer Barbara Kingsolver says that the very least you can do is figure out what you hope for. And the most you can do is to live inside that hope. Not admire it from the distance, but live in it, under its roof. I love that. I say, let's build it. Let's live inside this hope. Each of us individually brings gifts to make the world a better place. And that's why I promote so much this concept of authenticity and belonging. Because in order for us to create authentically and share our truth and share our wisdom and our perspective and the wisdom and the perspective that were given to us by our ancestors, we need to feel safe enough. We need to have acceptance and belonging. Because remember what I have said before, that the soul is very shy. And if we fear that our truth will be ridiculed, diminished, or laughed at, we will not share our truth. And we need your truth. We need your truth, because your truth is part of the bigger puzzle. So my hope is in creativity. My hope is in us as creators coming together to co-create a more beautiful, a more sustainable, a kinder world. A kinder world. Oh, let me share with you one of my favorite poems on kindness. It was written by Naomi Shihab Nye. She says, before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. See the future dissolve in a moment, like broth, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all of this must go, so you see how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating chicken and maize will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans, and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must also know sorrow as the other deepest thing inside. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it until your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes in the morning and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world and says, it is I you have been looking for. And then it goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. Kindness. My hope is that we don't look away from the suffering of others simply because it's uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable because that's one of the things that makes us human. We suffer when we see the suffering of others. This being uncomfortable is what propels us to do something to alleviate one another's pain. We are here to help one another, to support one another. But if we look away, the suffering continues. Last month, during a Zoom conversation, which we call Laugh and Learn, is once a month, and it's actually coming up this Thursday if you want to join us. This is a session led by our beloved Angie Walters, one of our congregants. In that conversation, we were talking about asylum last month, and it was a hard topic. It was such a hard topic, and someone in the group said something along the lines of feeling useless, helpless, like there is so much suffering in the world and there is nothing we can do. And then I said to them, at least we are engaged with the topic instead of looking away. And then I shared with them how last year in Oklahoma on Fridays, I would go to the detention center to visit with people from Latin America who were detained there. And they felt so alone, so alone. Their families didn't even know where they were. And they felt forgotten inside of that labyrinth, inside of that beast of concrete and metal that was that big, large prison. But I would tell them that at noon each Friday, a group of people, between 12 and 20 people, were out there, rain or shine, and said their names and advocated for their release. And that just made their day. They didn't feel as alone. That gave them hope. We feel the pain of other human beings because at the core of who we are, there is goodness, kindness. We lose part of our humanity when we look away from the suffering of others. For a few years now, I have been following the work of the Human Nature Lab out of Yale University, where drawing on decades of research on social science and evolutionary biology in genetics and in neuroscience, their research shows that opposite to popular belief, to what we have been told about the survival of the fittest, human beings are actually wired for goodness. We have actually been able to survive as a species because of this ability to care for one another, and because of our ability to pass down the knowledge that we accumulate and how we're able to collaborate. We have done this for the survival and the evolution of our species, and that gives me hope. I find hope in their work because it shows that while culture and societies are powerful, there are deeper, much more powerful evolutionary forces that move through us, which propel us towards goodness and collaboration and love and kindness. Some people see this as God, right? That goodness at our core. Some people believe that God is that goodness. And that resonates. I feel it. Do you feel it? That goodness at the core of your being? And with that at our core, it gives me hope that we can build a better world. With that version of God, instead of the punitive and vengeful versions of God, which are so damaging. I recently read an article in the New York Times about a decades-long study on how the Inuit people of the Arctic raise their children. The article said that traditional Inuit parenting is incredibly nurturing and tender. If you look at all the parenting styles around the world and rank them by their gentleness, the Inuit approach would likely rank near the top. The culture views scolding or even speaking to children in an angry voice as inappropriate. End of quote. I look at this perspective because kind and gentle models of raising our children give me hope. My hope is in our ability to raise future generations of children who are kind and grow up to be kind adults. But first, we must get rid of our punitive parenting styles where we yell and scold and even hit our children, teaching them, modeling for them that violence is okay. I am interested in parenting models and educational models that don't repress the personhood, the innate creativity, and the natural goodness that our children are born with. Another researcher I follow, Alison Gopnik, who teaches philosophy and psychology at the University of California, Berkeley, In her cognitive science lab, she has been able to see the goodness, the kindness that human beings are born with. According to Gopnik, altruism comes naturally to young children. As a reminder, altruism is a benevolence that is present in human beings that makes us delight in the happiness of others, that make us invest in the well-being of others. What we are learning is that we have been able to survive because of our capacity to love, to cooperate, to share knowledge, and to have empathy for others. My hope is in the healing that needs to happen for us to be restored to our natural state of goodness. I have heard some people say that there is no crime, only trauma. There is no crime, only trauma. My hope is that we move away from punishment and invest more in healing. That's why the restorative justice movement gives me hope. And my hope is in this work too, in our work together, in this movement of making a kinder, gentler, more compassionate, more diverse world. And I'm ready to do more than hope. I am ready to get working on it, to build this new world. So I have my hard hat. I have my blueprints. And I'm ready to do this work of building a new world. Are you ready? Join me. Today, I think of you and I think of your families and I wonder how you're doing. I wonder how you're all doing because these times are really hard on our spirit. And so we are beginning this new ritual here known as joys and sorrows. For each joy and each sorrow that we bring today, we put a stone in a bowl of water. The water represents the collective embrace of this community. Feel free to do this at home too, if you're willing and able. At the end, we will ask you what sorrows and what joys you bring, and you can share them with us via email or on the chat. Our first sorrow, our first stone, is in memory of Hope Johnson, a Unitarian Universalist minister who touched the lives of many, including the lives of your ministers, including Fred Wooden. And she worked tirelessly towards building a more accepting world. We put a second stone for those of you in our congregation who have lost loved ones. We put another one for individuals and families who are actively fighting COVID. We put one for our youth who are facing loneliness. We place another one for the elderly who are in isolation. One for those of you who are in self-quarantine, unable to hug your loved ones who are living under the same roof. We add one last one for all the sorrows we carry in our hearts. Now for joys, we put a stone in the bowl because this week we heard some very promising news regarding COVID vaccines. That brings us hope. And another joy is that here at Fountain Street Church, we are cleaning and decluttering and doing a little bit of remodeling because we are looking forward to welcoming you back in a few months. We want to have the most welcoming, the most hospitable areas for you to be part of this community. So that is another joy for sure. Again, feel free to share your joys and sorrow with us. We love you. We care for you deeply. Reach out if you need us. We are here.
One of the ways you, Fountain Street Church, are generating hope and building a new way is through the funding of Pastors B. You may not hear much about this fund, but let me tell you that each week, as your minister for spiritual care and practice, I field multiple calls from the larger community of people who are seeking financial support, trying to find housing, to cover expenses, bills, and utilities, trying, especially in these difficult times, to stay afloat. And because of your generous gifts, we are able to offer some small expression of support, a financial reminder that no one is in it alone, and also taking responsibility as our part in the larger community to do what we can. During the weeks of Advent, the weekly offering is split. Each week, half of it goes to the operations of the church, which are still in need of your support, and the other half goes either to Black Lives Matter, as it did last week and will again next week, or to Pastors B, this fund from which we draw to offer support to our neighbors until we can truly be in a world where no one needs to worry about shelter or food or income or health care. So please, my friends, during this spiritual act of generosity, take a moment to realize that you are building hope with your gift. This week's offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you.
Things definitely feel different this year around Fountain Street Church. We are spread out virtually, and we don't have the normal rhythms and patterns of the Advent and holiday festivities. But there are a remarkable number of ways in which you can still feel connected to our congregation. Immediately following this service, we invite you as you are, to the Deepening. This is a place where through Zoom we can gather as a community and go deeper with today's service. Maybe you'll recognize some familiar faces, maybe you'll get to know some new ones. But what's important is that you feel safe and held there. You can access the Deepening by clicking the Zoom link that was sent out in this morning's email. Much like the Deepening, we also have the Grounding, and that's on Wednesdays at 6:30 with Reverends Matthew and Greta Joe. You are invited every week, as you are, to join the rest of the community as we make space with one another, go deeper with one another, and find new ways to connect not only with ourselves, but with our community. You can access the Grounding by clicking on the Zoom link that's sent out every Wednesday, and any questions can be sent to Reverends Matthew or Greta Joe. What's important is you know that you are welcome there. Additionally, on Thursday, we have another Laugh and Learn with Reverend Mariela and Angie Walters. Though candid, we take on deep issues there, including this week's look at Confederate monuments. Perhaps that's of interest to you. Perhaps you just want to connect in a different way. Whatever your reason, please consider joining us for that way of going deeper with our community. That's on Thursday, and you'll get more information about that sent to you on Wednesday. And finally, next Sunday, we all have a chance to make new friends because the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, that's a mouthful, is joining us for our 10 o'clock service. You'll see more information about that as we get closer to it, but what's important to know is that this is just a special way in which we can make bigger connections beyond these walls as we talk about, and a way for you to demonstrate that beautiful, wonderful, and liberating Fountain Street hospitality that so many of us have come to love and enjoy. So please, mark your calendars. That should be a fun and special service. All of these and so much more are available to you, and we hope that you will find invitation and space within each of them. Blessed be the opportunity to connect deeper, even during this virtual time of being Fountain Street Church.